Today on the Sky News Daily with me, Mark Austin, could Trump's approach to the conflict between Israel and Iran work? Donald Trump left the G7 meeting early, telling reporters on Air Force One that he wanted what he called a real end to the conflict, and he's not reached out to Tehran to try and engineer peace talks, as he hopes to do better than just a ceasefire. Well, 5 days on since Israel launched its first strike on Iran, there now seems to be a US military build-up in the region. So how will Trump's style of diplomacy play out? Joining us to discuss that is Sky's security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clarke. So, Michael, let's talk first of all about where we are with all this. Trump has left Canada, the G7 meeting, early. He's called a meeting of his Security Council. What do you think is going on?
I think he knows he's at the biggest turning point of his career in this administration as far as foreign policy is concerned, because this is the biggest issue, Iran. It's the one he's talked about all the time, going back to his first administration. It's what he talked about in between the two administrations from 2020 till last year. He always said he will deal with Iran. And sometimes by dealing with Iran, he meant he would denuclearize Iran. Sometimes he meant he would do a deal with Iran to keep their nuclear ambitions very low or off the table. And sometimes he seemed to imply that he would destroy Iran. So we don't quite know what he meant. There is a sort of a really delicate Iran moment now arriving. Iran is now on the floor, with Israel able to range over its territory and destroy pretty well what it wants, if it's got the bombs to do it. And President Trump has got to decide now, how far does he back Israel? Is he going to join in with this attack to somehow destroy the Iranian revolution? Or is he going to restrain Israel? Is he going to do a deal, a nuclear deal, which the Israelis don't want? They absolutely don't want, but is he going to do a deal and impose it on them? It's a bit like the Ukrainian issue for him, but one that he cares about. Whereas he doesn't care about Ukraine, just wanted to get it out of the way. He does care about the Iran issue because he's made such a big deal of it in the last 10 years.
You say the Israelis can do pretty much what they want now. What they can't do on their own is destroy the nuclear program of Iran. The big question, I guess, is do you think that Donald Trump is preparing for military action by America to finish this nuclear program?
He's certainly putting himself in a position to do so if he chooses to. So we know that there's a lot of jets gone from Ramstein Air Base, F-15s and F-16s. All the tankers are with them. There's at least 7 tankers in the air as we speak to refuel them on the way to the Middle East. He's got 3 carrier battle groups. He's got 2 in the area already, the Bush and the Carl Vinson. The Nimitz is on its way. It'll be there in a couple of days. And he's got B-52s at, where else? Diego Garcia. And the B-52s that he's got there can carry the bunker buster bombs, the really heavy ones, the GBU-57, as it's known, which the Israelis haven't got and can't carry. The Israelis don't have an aircraft that can carry. It's 12 tons. So the Americans are building up their forces. Now, whether this is to convince Tehran that they could do it, that they mean it, whether it's a bluff, or whether it's just to, like any commander-in-chief, to say, look, I want to have the options, give me the options. But those forces are certainly converging, and this coming week and, from now into next week will be really critical moments in Donald Trump's whole Iranian policy, such as it is.
And is another reason why it's such a big decision that if you do take out the nuclear program, and if that leads to some sort of regime change, who knows what replaces that regime?
Yes, all that we know about regime change in the last 30 or 40 years is that dictatorial regimes are not replaced by liberal democratic regimes overnight. Sometimes that may be the outcome after next, as it were, but the immediate outcome is usually chaos, followed by autocracy, followed by some sort of terror. They're not normally better. If the Iranian revolution is somehow toppled, it will not be replaced, I'm sure, by a sort of a Western-orientated, secular, liberalish government. And if you like, the Pahlavi family, the old Shah of Iran's family, Reza Pahlavi is in the United States as a famous emigre. He's fated in the US as if somehow he might be a returning ruler. Forget it. The Pahlavi family are really not popular at all in Iran. And the idea of an emigre who sat out for 40 years coming back, it never works.
Right, we'll see what Trump decides. As for Iran, its missile stock presumably is being exhausted fairly rapidly, and we don't know what is left. Where do you think they stand now in terms of how strong they are?
They tried to create a sort of 1,000-missile attack on Israel as an immediate response, and they're only able to make about 150, 160. So they're certainly shorter of missiles than they were. They've still got quite a lot. What they're really short of is launchers, and that's the whole point. The Israelis have been very good at being able to attack these mobile launchers. They've located them quickly, they've attacked them quickly, because once the Israelis are inside Iranian airspace and their aircraft are able to range around, which they couldn't do before when there were defences there, but they've taken all the air defences down. They're inside Iran. It's 1,000 miles from Tel Aviv to Tehran. So these aircraft are towards the limit of their range. But once they're in Iran with air-to-air refuelling, they range around in Iranian airspace. When they see these launchers, they attack them. And the lack of launchers is what's really affecting the Iranians' ability to hit back. Let's guess that they've still got 1,000 missiles, but they can only launch maybe 50 or 60 of them because of the lack of launchers. And every time they launch, they risk losing the launcher.
And not many of those get through.
Not many get through. About 10% are getting through, which shows that the Iron Dome, any defensive system can be overwhelmed by numbers. So the Iranians are now facing the issue, okay, we can't affect Israel directly, so do we now affect the international community to put pressure on Israel to stop?
Right.
You close the Strait of Hormuz, which is very serious and would have all sorts of effects on China, which won't be at all pleased about it. And you begin to do something about other areas. I mean, you tell the Houthis then to, increase their attacks on any shipping in the Red Sea. So you actually create problems for world trade. You internationalize the crisis.
But couldn't that then guarantee to bring America into the...
It might. That's the point. And if you attack American and Western forces, and then they retaliate. So that's the problem for the Iranians. If they can't, as it were, humble the Israelis themselves, which they can't at the moment, then their only option is to internationalize the conflict with all the risks that runs for them.
So, I mean, is the likelihood, given all that the Iranian leadership may now be in the mood to do a deal? And when I say a deal, I mean to relent and to agree to end their pursuit for a nuclear bomb.
If I had to guess, I'd say they're in a mood to have talks about talks. In other words, they'll indicate that they want a diplomatic solution to this, but they are very, very reluctant to say we're going to cancel our nuclear program because they've put so much into it. And they were reasonably close to a deal before this Israel attack. And we all thought that there would be a deal along the lines that Trump was talking about, which would have looked very like the 2015 deal, which Trump then tore up in 2017. The deal that Obama did, which was the JCPOA, the famous Iran nuclear deal.
Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
But that's right, the Joint or Comprehensive Plan of Action. Yeah, there was
anyway, JCPOA.
JCPOA. We tripped off it. The JCPOA.
Yes.
So what does it mean? I can't remember.
Yeah. Which restricted Iran to 300 kg of uranium, enriched to 3.67%, which would have left them a long way.
Very long
from
way.
the sudden production of a nuclear weapon. William Hague was saying today, sorry to interrupt you, William Hague was saying today, that was the right deal, and that would have worked. And of course it was Trump came in
because it was Obama's deal, he wrecked it. The thing with an enrichment, 3.67 is what you need to burn fuel for civilian purposes. You might need up to 20%, interestingly, for marine engines. Nuclear ships and submarines use 20% enriched uranium, which is very high. But you don't need anything beyond 20%.
And the argument was they were approaching, the Israeli argument, even the IEA were saying...
They've got, they've now got, according to the IEA, they've got 400 kilograms of 60%.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to get from 60% to 80%, and then 90% is weapons grade, but 80% will do. I mean, the Hiroshima bomb was 80%.
So would they have got to that under the 2015 deal, do you think?
No. If you want to develop a civil nuclear program, like everybody else, you can do it, and everything else is severely checked. And we'll look at what's happening. In other words, if you break this deal, the sanction will immediately snap back into place. That was the way it was.
It's pretty rigorous inspection as well.
And it's very rigorous inspection.
Why then did Israel, why then did some in the United States in the Trump administration think that this was not a tough enough deal? Because there are those, certainly in Israel, saying that it was too much leeway for Iran.
The Israelis, and Netanyahu in particular, have always opposed the idea of any nuclear deal with the Iranians because they say, look, it doesn't matter what deal you do, they will cheat. And there's a long history of that. And why should we allow the Iranians any nuclear program when they don't need a civilian nuclear program because they've got all the fossil fuels they need? Now, there's an environmental argument that's arisen since 2010 to say, well, we all need to move on to non-fossil fuel sources. But the Israelis have always opposed the deal. And there's a dirty little secret about all of this, which is that people who opposed the 2015 deal said, look, we have this deal with them. Look at what they're doing with the Houthis. Look at what they're doing with Hamas. Look at all the militias they have across the Middle East. Look at how malign and active they are. The point is, we were the ones in 2015 who insisted that we keep the whole arrangement to nuclear only. The Iranians wanted to talk about all sorts of things. We said, no. And the Iranians eventually agreed and said, okay. And they stuck to it.
So where do you think we're heading? I mean, how do you think this will play out? I guess the key decision now rests with Donald Trump.
I mean, I'm guessing, obviously, but I think Donald Trump is in a mess and he doesn't really know what his policy is. And he mustn't be aware that he's facing a very critical moment in the early phase of his presidency on this, the most important foreign policy issue he has faced. And he's not in control of it. He's behind the curve on this whole thing. Netanyahu is driving it. So what do I think is going to happen? I think Netanyahu will continue these attacks and then he'll declare victory and stop. The nuclear program will be devastated but not destroyed. And the Iranian military will be on its knees as a result of these attacks. President Trump may then move in and say, I've created this situation, but it won't solve the problem because the Israelis will still be committed somehow to carrying on a campaign against Iran having any nuclear power under present circumstances. So it does look as if this will be a sort of forever grumbling war in which the Americans will try to stay outside of, but will keep getting pulled into in different ways. That's what I would guess would happen.
But isn't the truth that Israel is at its strongest when its interests align with the interests of the United States? And on this, in a way, they don't align because Trump wants to end war, because Trump wants a deal. He's the deal maker. He's the guy who wants to stand up and say, look what I've done. This is my deal. Netanyahu is not interested in a deal, is he?
No, he's not. But if he can create a situation where Israel is the as it were the mini superpower of the region, and that Saudi Arabia accommodates itself through the Abraham Accords process. They're a long way from it at the moment. But if Saudi Arabia, as it were, comes alongside Israel, in the sense that they learn to live together, and between them they create a sort of security arrangement for the region, the United States would find that pretty conducive. And Donald Trump might then, in future, get some credit for being the man who, chaotically as it was, nevertheless presided over a better situation in the Middle East and allowed America to step away from Middle East politics. I mean, US presidents from Bill Clinton onwards have desperately tried to get out of the Middle East because it's such a mess for them, and none of them have managed it. They've all got pulled back in. Trump wants to avoid that, but he may feel that being pulled back in would be, for a one cataclysmic remaking of the region, will create a new basis for American power, which is going to be expressed in the Indo-Pacific. And they can stop worrying about the Middle East because the Israelis and the Saudis have got it sewn up between them. As a long-term vision, that's not so crazy from the US point of view.
So just to go back to where we started, and you said this is the defining moment for Donald Trump. If that is the case, do you think that Donald Trump is equipped to make the decision? Does he have the people around him who have the kind of vision and understanding of international diplomacy, what's possible, what's not? He's got a reputation for getting things done, and it might work in this case.
I think if it does work in this case, it'll be as much by luck as by judgment. I mean, he has an instinct for things. He makes policy on the hoof. But the group he's got around him is, most people say, it's amateur. I mean, other adjectives are available. If the luck goes with Trump, then it's possible that the sort of thing we've been talking about might work out. But I'm sure it won't work out through dint of really hard diplomatic preparation, because at the moment America is approaching every policy issue and is making policy on the hoof. And I mean, it's like the caravan style of management. You know, the vehicle in the front thinks it knows where it's going, and behind there's a whole sort of a tailback of cars and other vehicles trying to work out what on earth is happening at the front. That's the way Trump does things. People say he likes to do it that way because he likes to be unpredictable. He uses unpredictability as a force of power. He is. By law of averages, some of it works out quite well. Worked out quite well between India and Pakistan. They were looking for somebody to tell them to stop, and the Americans told them to stop. So well done, America. Did it well on that. But hopeless on Ukraine, hopeless on Gaza, unsure over Iran, Israel, and we'll see how it works out. But if it does work, it won't be by dint of really careful diplomatic preparation.
Michael, thank you very much. That's it for today. We'll be back again tomorrow.